It's time for CIBL Biz Tips, bringing you actionable strategies to grow and improve your business. Prepare to become civilized.
What's up, Central Illinois? Welcome to CIBL Biz Tips, where we bring you concepts and strategies to grow your Central Illinois business. I'm Derek Hayden. I'm here with Garrett Ulmer. We're your hosts. And today we have in the studio for what we're planning on 3 or 4 sessions is Bob Woodard from IPRF. How are you doing, Bob?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. And before we kick it off, Bob, give the listeners a little idea of what your background is. How many years of experience you have and where you're at now.
Yeah, you bet. So this actually makes my 29th year in the industry. So I started right out of college, really have never looked back. And I'm fortunate in that my background's actually pretty diverse. So I started for about the first 7-8 years working for a carrier. And then I left that carrier and formed my own agency, grew that to 4 different agencies operating in 26 states, and had the ability to actually sell those agencies 2016, 2017, and took a little time off, but then came back into the industry, whereas now I'm actually director of marketing for Illinois Public Risk Fund, IPRF, that you had mentioned. And we focus strictly on work comp arena, but more specifically for public entity. But honestly, what we do is pretty much universal across the board.
Awesome.
Gotcha.
Awesome. So all you listeners out there, you've seen the title of the show. You know we're going to be talking about workers' compensation, which is everybody's favorite topic as a business owner. But in Garrett and I's experience, work comp is a very misunderstood product that businesses in most cases are required to buy by state law. And a lot of people think it's just an expense that's cutting out of their bottom line. And I know there's some things that you can do to control your cost that we'll talk about in later sessions. But today, what I'd like Bob to explain to all of our listeners is how exactly is work comp premium calculated for business owners?
And that's kind of the interesting thing is there's not this huge multi-page calculation. And a lot of times we like to think that it's a lot more complicated than what it actually is. It really isn't. Every single position that you have within you as an employer, from your admin to your security to warehouse workers, they all have class codes. And those classifications essentially tell us as underwriters what that risk level is for those specific positions, and then what the premium is that we should be charging. So the calculation itself, that really is more just mathematical, kind of scientific. It's figuring out what your class codes are and what the appropriate rate is there. You multiply that times whatever your mod factor is. And your mod factor, for those that don't know, it's actually a pretty important tool for not just you as an employer, but also for underwriting. It allows a person to gauge what your losses have been. So if you're running on, let's say, a 0.90, so you're less than a 1.0 mod, then that tells us that your losses have been pretty minimal and that you're doing a good job of controlling them. The flip side to that, and these are the ones that really, I hope, are paying attention today, if your mods are 1.2, 1.3, you're in a situation where you're incurring pretty significant losses. And that right there tells us either you had some very unfortunate couple of years, because honestly, let's face it, there's going to be certain accidents, things of that nature that are just unavoidable. But it also tells us as underwriters what your losses have been. So we take your class codes and the premiums associated with that, we multiply that times your mod factor, and then from there we multiply that times the payroll that is there. And the payroll is always divided by 100 because it's work comp is always figured on a per 100 basis. That's the scientific part. The art side of this is where the really good underwriters come into play, because they understand that not every single employer can just be by the book, that this is what the calculator says, so this is what we're going to charge. They're going to take a look at, are you as an employer being proactive in your loss control? Are you simply just sitting back and letting the losses be what they're going to be? Or are you actively every single day encouraging training and teaching people to lock out equipment and, to be able to tag things out. Just, how exactly are you taking control of your losses? And that's where an underwriter has the ability to assign debits or credits to the overall premium. So I always, and this is historically 29 years of doing this, there are some employers out there that they think less is more. That is so not the case when it comes to underwriting. If you've had some bad years, tell us why you had those bad years. We're human. We want to know those things. We understand that, there's just certain things that are unavoidable. But by the same token, let's say 5 years ago, you're running at a very high mod. Now you're running at, say, a 1.0. Take credit for that. Tell us, hey, it's because we did this, we did that, we implemented, loss control recommendations. Let our underwriters know so that way they can better assess what your rates need to be, because, we're in this for the long haul. We're not looking for employers that, have had 3 different carriers in the last 5 years. That's not how you build a successful work comp program. So that's how we look at every single account is, what can we do to make sure that you stay on the books for the next 10, 15, 20 years and make sure that we can have a positive impact on not just your bottom line, but ultimately for the employees to be able to take care of them and keep them healthy.
That's great. I know, with Derek and I, when we meet with clients and discuss work comp, we always talk about, believe it or not, it's actually the piece of your insurance package that you have the most control over.
Yeah.
And, I think sometimes employers think the reverse. It's the one that they have the least control over. And, if you can sit down with them, discuss it, educate them, we always try to break down the mod almost like a report card, with an A, B, C, D, E, or F as far as that goes. But, and use simplistic terms. And it's amazing how with some employers, they've just never been explained really, sometimes of how they can control it. And then you see the light bulb go off and different things that you can do to help impact it. And it makes a huge difference.
It really does. And especially when they're using the tools provided to them, there's a lot of great carriers out there that are providing safety grants and, other financial incentives to be able to go out and not just provide the training, but to be able to provide the tools to make sure that the employees stay safe. And those are the employers that we really enjoy working with.
One thing that stuck out to me, Bob, was you mentioned as you're talking that you're not looking for the employer or the business who's had 3 or 4 different work comp carriers in the past several years. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of business owners make is, well, I'm just trying to get the cheapest one I can get right now. When in fact, you're probably hurting yourself, because the people who are pricing, quote unquote, pricing your premium see that they're not going to reward you for it because they know that you're chasing the lowest premium dollar you can find, and something bad's going to happen at some point in time. Does that sound right, Bob?
That's 100% right. And, the other side of that is, when we see an employer that is just jumping ship every year or two, oftentimes we'll just refuse to quote because it's just not what our, end game is. Our end game is to be able to help you. And, if we know we're only going to have 12, 24 months to be able to have a positive effect on you as an employer, honestly, our efforts are better spent elsewhere.
Yep, absolutely. And the one thing, going back to kind of the rates and how everything's rated, one thing I see business owners, I won't say forget about, is they don't calculate as they're opening a business or expanding their business. They think of all the expenses that go into, either buying a building, equipment, employees, that type of stuff. As you're evaluating adding employees, make sure you're including your work comp rates as well, because that can be a big surprise to a lot of businesses, especially if you're in if you're a tree trimmer or in construction. Those rates can be pretty high.
Yeah.
So, you want to talk ahead of time with an advisor to make sure that you are doing your due diligence as you build your business. So that's one thing I see a lot of new and growing business owners make is they jump right into it, and then they start to get their work comp premiums. They're like, I can't afford that. Maybe we need to sit back for a few more months and get some more business going. Then we can add some employees. So that's one tip I always try to share with business owners there.
And that really is a role of a good agent, is to be able to guide them through those processes and help them think of things that they otherwise probably never would have. So
Yep.
kudos to all the agents out there that are doing that and doing it well.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good spot to stop for session 1. In session 2, Bob will be talking a little bit about who needs work comp. Do you even need it? And if you don't have it and you do need it, what happens? So until next time, you can follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn, and follow Garrett and I there as well personally. While you're listening into Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. It'd be greatly appreciated. Till next time, y'all have been civilized. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Central Illinois Business Leaders Podcast. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/CIBL podcast. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It's the civilized thing to do.